In the dead of winter 1959, deep within the Ural Mountains of the Soviet Union, a mystery was born from ice and snow. A mystery that continues to haunt us, to defy explanation, and to whisper terrifying possibilities into the cold night air. 9 experienced hikers, young and full of life, set out on a challenging expedition. They never returned. When search parties finally found their camp, the scene was not one of tragedy, but of pure, incomprehensible horror. Their tent, their only shelter against the brutal elements, had been sliced open from the inside. Their belongings were left behind, as if they had fled in a sudden, unshakable panic. Their bodies were discovered scattered across the desolate landscape, some nearly a mile away. They were half-dressed, some without shoes, in temperatures far below freezing. And the injuries were unlike anything the seasoned investigators had ever seen. Crushed ribs, fractured skulls, and one woman missing her tongue. There were no signs of a struggle, no other footprints but their own. The official conclusion was a cryptic statement about a compelling natural force. But what force could drive 9 seasoned mountaineers to abandon their shelter and run to their deaths? What happened on that frozen mountain, known by the local Mansi people as Khalat Siakal, or Dead Mountain? This is the unsolved mystery of the Dyatlov Pass incident. To understand the sheer strangeness of this event, you first need to understand who these people were. This wasn't a group of naive adventurers. They were students and graduates of the Ural Polytechnical Institute, all of them grade 2 hikers with extensive skiing and mountaineering experience. They were on the verge of achieving grade 3 certification, the highest in the Soviet Union. They were tough, smart, and prepared. The leader was 23-year-old Igor Dyatlov, the group's namesake. He was a meticulous planner and a respected leader. Then there was Zinaida Kolmogorova, a vibrant 22-year-old who had been on many expeditions. Lyudmila Dubinina, just 20 years old, was known for her strength and cheerful singing. Alexander Kolvatov was a 24-year-old student of nuclear physics, a fact that would become eerily relevant later. Rustam Slobodin, Yuri Doroshenko, and Nikolai Thiboksbrignoles were all skilled and resilient members. Georgy Krivonishenko was an engineer at a secret nuclear facility. And Semyon Zolotaryov, the oldest at 38, was a mysterious figure, a combat veteran with strange tattoos who had joined the group at the last minute. A 10th member, Yuri Yudin, was forced to turn back early in the trip due to illness, a twist of fate that saved his life but would haunt him forever. The group's journey began like any other expedition. Their diaries and photographs, recovered from the abandoned tent, paint a picture of camaraderie and high spirits. They documented their progress, laughing and posing for pictures, building makeshift stoves and singing songs by the campfire. They were battling the elements, but they were skilled and confident. Their plan was to trek across the northern Urals and climb Mount Ator. On February 1st, they began their approach to the mountain. Bad weather, including worsening visibility and strong winds, caused them to deviate from their planned route. They ended up making camp on the eastern slope of Khalat Siakal, just under a mile from the safety of the treeline below. This was a fateful decision. Camping on an exposed slope was unusual for a group this experienced, suggesting the weather conditions were deteriorating rapidly, forcing them to stop. Their final diary entry, dated January 31st, speaks of their plan to build a storage shelter for excess food and equipment before making the final push. Their last photograph shows them diligently setting up their tent in the deep snow, preparing for the night. Everything seemed normal, but sometime during the night of February 1st or the early morning of February 2nd, something went terribly wrong. Something so terrifying it caused them to slash their way out of their tent and flee into a blizzard with temperatures plummeting to minus 30 degrees Celsius. When Dyatlov and his group failed to send a telegram by their scheduled return date of February 12th, no one was immediately concerned. Delays were common on such difficult expeditions, but as the days turned into a week, their families grew frantic. On February 20th, a massive search and rescue operation was launched, involving planes, helicopters, and volunteer search parties. 6 days later, on February 26th, the searchers stumbled upon the abandoned campsite. The scene was chillingly quiet. The large canvas tent was collapsed and partially covered in snow. But it wasn't the weather that had brought it down. It had been deliberately cut and ripped open, clearly from the inside. Inside, all the group's belongings, their skis, food, extra clothing, and shoes were neatly arranged. It was as if they had left in an instant without a moment to grab the gear that could have saved their lives. Leading away from the tent, a trail of footprints descended the slope. The investigators were stunned. The prints showed that the hikers had been barefoot or wearing only socks or a single boot. 8 or 9 sets of prints were visible, heading in a straight, orderly line down towards a patch of woods. There were no signs of a struggle, no evidence of anyone else being there. It looked like they had walked calmly away from the tent. But why? Why would 9 experienced mountaineers cut open their only shield against a deadly storm and walk barefoot into the Siberian wilderness? The first bodies were found about a mile from the tent, just below the tree line, under a large cedar tree. They were Yuri Doroshenko and Georgy Krivonishenko. They were stripped down to their underwear. The remains of a small fire were nearby. The branches on the cedar tree were broken up to a height of 15 feet, suggesting someone had desperately tried to climb it, perhaps to get a better view or escape from something on the ground. The hands of both men were raw and scraped, as if they had been trying to claw at the tree. The official cause of death was hypothermia. It seemed plausible. In a state of paradoxical undressing, a symptom of severe hypothermia, people feel an overwhelming sense of heat and remove their clothes. But it didn't explain why they were so far from the tent in the first place. The search continued. The next 3 bodies were discovered between the cedar tree and the camp: Igor Dyatlov, Zina Kolmogorova, and Rustam Slobodin. Their positions suggested they had been trying to return to the tent. Dyatlov was found clutching a birch branch, his other arm raised as if to shield his face. Kolmogorova's body showed signs of a desperate crawl back up the hill. Slobodin had a small crack in his skull, but doctors ruled it a non-fatal injury. Like the first 2, all 3 were determined to have died of hypothermia. At this point, the investigators might have concluded it was a tragic but straightforward case of hikers getting lost and freezing to death. But 4 members of the group were still missing. For 2 long months, the search went on. Finally, in May, as the snow began to melt, the remaining 4 bodies were discovered in a ravine about 250 feet from the cedar tree. They were buried under more than 10 feet of snow, and what they found here changed everything. This was no simple case of hypothermia. Lyudmila Dubinina, Nikolai Thiboksbrignoles, Alexander Kolvatov, and Semyon Zolotaryov had suffered catastrophic, violent injuries. Thiboksbrignoles had a severe skull fracture. Zolotaryov and Dubinina had their chests crushed, with multiple ribs broken on both sides. A forensic expert, Dr. Boris Vozrozhdeny, stated that the force required to cause such damage was equivalent to a high-speed car crash. He was adamant that these injuries could not have been caused by another human being because there were no external signs of trauma, no soft tissue damage, no bruising. It was as if they had been crushed by an immense, invisible pressure. But the most gruesome discovery was with Lyudmila Dubinina. She was found kneeling in the running water of a stream in the ravine. Her eyes, tongue, and parts of her lips and facial tissue were missing. The mystery deepened with every new piece of evidence. The investigation uncovered a series of bizarre and unsettling clues that only added more questions. First, there was the matter of radiation. Forensic tests revealed that the clothing of several hikers, particularly Krivonishenko and Dubinina, contained significant levels of radioactive contamination. The source of this radiation has never been identified. Was it from their previous work, or did they encounter something on the mountain? Then there were the witness accounts. Another group of hikers, camping about 30 miles south of Dyatlov's group, reported seeing strange orange spheres or lights moving in the sky on the night of the incident. The lead investigator of the case later admitted in an interview that he had also seen these spheres and received direct orders from high-ranking officials to dismiss these reports. What were these lights, flares, weather balloons, or something else entirely? The condition of the bodies was also perplexing. In addition to the missing tongue, Some reports from the morgue attendants mentioned that the victim's skin had a strange orange or deep tan color, and their hair had turned gray. While some of these claims are debated, they have become a staple of the mystery. And we must return to the central question: why did they cut their way out of the tent? It signifies an immediate and mortal threat from within. But if the threat was inside, why did they all flee in the same direction? If the threat was outside, why not just untie the entrance? The act of cutting suggests a desperate, split-second decision to escape at any cost, even if it meant certain death in the freezing cold. So what happened on Dead Mountain? Over the decades, dozens of theories have emerged, ranging from the scientific to the deeply paranormal. Let's start with the most rational explanations. The official theory, both in 1959 and after a reinvestigation in 2019, is an avalanche. The idea is that a slab avalanche, where a large plate of snow slides down, struck the tent. The weight of the snow could have caused the internal injuries and induced panic, forcing them to cut their way out and flee downhill. Once outside, disoriented and underdressed, they quickly succumbed to the elements. However, this theory has major problems. The search party found the tent was only partially covered in snow, not buried. The hikers' own footprints were still visible, which wouldn't be the case after a significant snow slide. Furthermore, the slope above the tent was not particularly steep, making a powerful avalanche unlikely. Respected mountaineers have long argued that the physical evidence at the site simply does not support a classic avalanche scenario. A more recent variation on this theory suggests a small, delayed slab avalanche. It wouldn't have buried the tent, but the cracking sound and sudden pressure of snow could have been mistaken for a larger, imminent catastrophe, causing the panic. This might explain their flight, but it still struggles to account for the massive internal injuries found on the bodies in the ravine. Another scientific theory points to a rare weather phenomenon known as a Kármán vortex street, which can generate infrasound. Infrasound is a low-frequency sound, below the range of human hearing, that can have bizarre physiological effects. Studies have shown it can induce feelings of intense panic, dread, nausea, and breathlessness. If a powerful katabatic wind blowing over the peak of Khaled's sea echo created this infrasound, it could have triggered an irrational, overwhelming terror in the hikers, making them feel like they were suffocating or having a heart attack inside the tent. This would explain their panicked flight, but like the avalanche theory, it doesn't adequately explain the radiation or the crushing injuries. This is where the theories take a turn into the realm of conspiracy and the unexplained. One of the most persistent theories is a secret military weapons test gone wrong. The area was known to be used by the Soviet military. The orange spheres in the sky could have been parachute mines or some other aerial ordnance. These weapons are designed to detonate in the air, creating a powerful concussive blast wave. Such a blast would perfectly explain the severe internal injuries without any external trauma. It would also explain the radiation found on their clothes. Perhaps the hikers stumbled into a test zone by accident. Their subsequent deaths would have been a massive embarrassment for the military, leading to a swift cover-up. The government's secretive handling of the case, classifying the files for decades and giving a vague cause of death, certainly lends credibility to this idea. Why were Dubinina's tongue and eyes missing? Scavengers are the most likely explanation. The body was found in a stream, and small animals like shrews or foxes often target soft tissues first. However, the cover-up theory suggests these injuries could have been the result of an interrogation or torture, though there's no solid evidence to support this. Then we venture into even stranger territory. The orange spheres have led many to speculate about a UFO or alien encounter. Could the hikers have witnessed something not of this world? Did an encounter with an unknown entity or technology cause the psychological terror that drove them from their tent? The crushing injuries, the radiation, the graying hair, in this theory, they are all attributed to the effects of advanced non-human technology. While it sounds like science fiction, the lack of a clear earthly explanation keeps this theory alive in the minds of many. Finally, there's the local folklore. The mountain's name, meaning Dead Mountain, existed long before this incident. The local Mansi people have legends of the mink, a creature similar to the Russian Yeti or Bigfoot. Could the hikers have been attacked by a large, powerful creature? This could explain the immense force of the injuries and the terror that caused them to flee. The Mansi were initially suspects in the investigation, but they were quickly cleared. They insisted that no human would have done this, and that a powerful, supernatural force was at play on the mountain. In 1959, the official investigation was abruptly closed. The final report stated that the group died as a result of an overwhelming unknown force. The files were classified and sent to a secret archive. For 30 years, the story was suppressed. It wasn't until the fall of the Soviet Union that the files were released, revealing the shocking details of the autopsies and the bizarre evidence. In 2019, Russian authorities reopened the case, but their conclusion was a disappointment to many. They once again cited a natural cause, refining the avalanche theory, combined with poor visibility as the most likely culprit. They completely dismissed any criminal or military involvement. But for the families of the victims, and for the millions of people fascinated by this case, that answer is simply not enough. Too many questions remain. Why did they walk so calmly away from the tent before succumbing to panic? What was the source of the radiation? What were the orange spheres that multiple independent groups witnessed in the sky? What could possibly inflict car crash-level internal injuries without breaking the skin? And why was Lyudmila Dubinina's tongue missing? The Dyatlov Pass incident is the perfect mystery. It's a haunting puzzle where every piece of evidence seems to contradict the others. Every theory you examine, no matter how logical, eventually crumbles under the weight of an unexplained detail. Was it a tragic confluence of natural events, an avalanche, high winds, and infrasound? Was it a Cold War secret, a weapons test covered up by a powerful state? Or was it something else, something beyond our current understanding of the world? Over 60 years later, the slopes of Dead Mountain still hold their secret. The story of those 9 hikers serves as a chilling reminder that there are forces in this world, both natural and perhaps unnatural, that we do not fully comprehend. Their final moments remain frozen in time, a silent testament to an unknown horror. The mystery of what happened that night endures, a cold, unanswered question echoing from the Ural Mountains.